I've always been curious about the Star Ocean series, with its mix of fantasy and sci-fi, interesting characters and worlds to explore, but I've never actually played any of the games in the series. That is until now. I've spent around 80 hours doing absolutely everything in Star Ocean: The Divine Force. So from a newcomer's perspective, is this the right entry to jump into? Let's take a look. I'm Adam Scott, and this is Star Ocean: The Divine Force. Starting all the way back in the before times, in the year 1996, imagine you have a Super Famicom, you're Japanese, and a new RPG just dropped. Life is sweet. Star Ocean came out between Chrono Trigger in 1995 and Final Fantasy VII in 1997. So yeah, while you likely enjoyed Star Ocean, you probably didn't love it as much as those other titans. And the critics felt the same way, with scores generally falling in the 7 out of 10 range. The first game established a lot of the series staples, like the futuristic setting, real-time battle system, item creation, and private actions that affect the storyline. Later entries leaned more into sci-fi and away from the fantasy elements, and outside of the first game, they've all been released outside of Japan. While the Star Ocean series never cut through to the mainstream like its contemporaries, it has developed a cult following over the years. Developed by Tri-Ace and published by Square Enix in 2022 for PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, Star Ocean: The Divine Force is the 6th mainline release in the series. Tri-Ace made a deliberate effort to evolve the series with the Divine Force, building upon its foundation, but creating a stronger presence in a crowded market. But as with all evolution, that can bring about new challenges. The Divine Force reintroduces dual protagonists first seen in Star Ocean: The Second Story. Upon starting the game, you'll choose between Raymond Lawrence, captain of the merchant ship Yetis, and Leticia Asirius, native and sovereign princess of the Kingdom of Asirius on the planet Aster 4. The two paths diverge at points, and while you'll get the majority of the story regardless of the character you choose, there are some areas where the main content is completely different because of how the party splits up. Most of the differences center on how each protagonist learns about the other. Ray learns about the customs and culture of Aster 4, the medieval planet he crash lands on, while Leticia learns about a large, technologically advanced universe beyond the stars. This structure keeps things fresh upon replays, which is nothing new for Star Ocean. The series has always had ample replay value thanks to its expansive post-game dungeon content and difficulty modes. After Ray is gunned down and crash lands on Aster 4, he meets Leticia and Knight Albert, who accompanies her. Ray needs to find the rest of his crew, and Leticia needs help saving the kingdoms from an impending war. And this sets the stage as the unlikely group joins forces. As you set out on your journey, the party grows with a surprisingly likable and well-rounded cast, with a chemistry that develops over the course of the adventure. Half is native to the planet, while the rest have a vast knowledge of advanced sciences, leading to funny moments, but also begs the question of what happens when an underdeveloped civilization is introduced to medical and technological advancements too quickly. It's a question the cast discusses frequently, with well-thought-out dialogue.
All right, everyone, let's make for the bridge. We'll be taking off soon.
In addition to the numerous story cutscenes, private actions also make a return. The original Star Ocean introduced the private action social system, where the protagonist's relationship points with the other characters are affected by the player's choices, which in turn affects the storyline, leading to branching paths and multiple different endings. This was expanded in Star Ocean: The Second Story, which had, wait for it, 86 different endings, with each of the possible permutations to these endings numbering in the hundreds, setting a benchmark for the number of outcomes possible for a video game. While the Divine Force doesn't have 86 endings, the 16 possible based on the connections with the other characters is nothing to shake a stick at. And these relationships don't just affect the storyline, but also the gameplay as well, shaping the way they behave toward each other in battle. The game's not all story and relationships. There's a whole world to explore that feels large and lively. The villages and castle towns are bustling with people and things to see. The fields and dungeons are varied, wondrous, filled with monsters and secrets. There's a lot of care put into the world, with the presentation clearly improving over the prior games. Exploration is handled surprisingly well, and one of the aspects I enjoyed most. Every zone and town you visit is littered with collectibles to find. These can be curative items, upgrades, weapons, armor, and more. Exploring is almost a minigame of its own, and discovering new platforms and secrets is its own reward, with the incredible movement system thanks in large part to DUMA. You know, your dynamic universal maneuver assistant? Who doesn't have one of those? This floating AI companion adds a lot of bells and whistles to the already buttery smooth movement. You can send out a pulse that points in the direction of chests, dash to seemingly impossible to reach ledges, float down to land softly, and even tip the scales during combat. The Divine Force nails its fundamental combat mechanics from the jump, solving a problem the series has wrestled with since its inception. Star Ocean has always had action-focused combat, but how that action plays out is radically different from game to game. Thanks to the new AP system and chain combos, battles remain fresh and exciting as you can mix and match your skills in chains for each character, similar to Fairy Fencer F. With 3 skills per button and a skill utilized by holding a button, you can have up to 12 active skills in battle per character. You'll select which of the 4 characters to bring into battle and can freely switch between them at any time. I really dug building and changing my combos and characters, ensuring that I had a beefy arsenal of skills at my disposal to deal with nearly any situation. Well-timed evasion rewards you with a special slowdown effect that makes it easier to counter enemies, similar to Eternites. The versatility that DUMA adds to the battle system is impressive, with mobility that ensures combat is always fast and flashy. With DUMA, you can quickly zip around the battlefield at high speeds, blindside foes for increased damage, surprise attack enemies outside of battle, and shield allies while extending buffs and reducing debuffs. If your dash pulls you out of an enemy's line of sight, you trigger a blindside. Enemies affected by blindside enter a stunned state and cannot attack for a few moments. DUMA actions are tied to a gauge that fills as you land blows and evade attacks, keeping you on the offensive. Attacks use action points, or AP, that determine the length of your combos. AP is essentially a stamina gauge, with only 5 AP by default. AP regenerates after a second or two, provided you don't initiate any more attacks or evasion. This forces you to play more methodically, since you'll have to pull back periodically. Successful blindsides add more AP to your gauge, maxing out at 15, letting you unleash lengthier combos and offensive actions. However, taking too much damage or getting KO'd reduces your AP total. All in, the combat system is simple, frenetic fun. When leveling up, characters receive SP, which you'll use to further enhance stats or to add new skills from the skill tree. Characters have 4 equipment slots, 1 for weapons, another for armor, and the remaining for accessories, which can be found, bought, or crafted. Item creation, another staple of the franchise, has an almost overwhelming amount of options, from crafting healing items to synthesizing armor with specific traits, and a ton more. But this system felt a bit too much like pulling a slot machine lever and hoping something good comes out. You can also upgrade DUMA by collecting these crystals and applying them to things like scanning range or shields, and more. The upgrade system itself isn't bad, but since you level up so frequently, you'll spend a lot of time in the menus that are fairly clunky to navigate. All throughout the towns, villages, and cities are characters waiting to challenge you to games of Isoa. 1 part card battler minus the cards, and 1 part chess, Isoa is a fun little diversion that I got way more invested in than I want to admit. You can start playing Isoa once you reach the seaport of Rythal. If you speak to the shady merchant just out of the Rythal Inn, he'll sell you an Isoa board. Once acquired, you can edit your deck of pawns. Like your mom, they start out very simple and not all that useful, but as you adventure, you'll acquire tons of interesting pieces with effects that change up the gameplay considerably. Some of the best ones come from defeating other players, which really drives you to play every challenger, hone your strategy, and increase your rank. The aim of the game is to have as many pieces on the grid as possible, dealing as much damage as possible, and taking your opponent's health to 0. The strategy comes in by trying to prevent your opponent from doing the same. You'll steadily rank up to eventually face the Masters of Isoa, becoming the Grand Master. With a huge world to explore, exciting and kinetic combat, and charming characters, Star Ocean: The Divine Force has a lot of elements to love, but it's not all perfect. AI-controlled party members have the same AP restrictions as you, and are dumb as a box of rocks. You can tweak their AI somewhat to make them attack a single target, or spread out to attack multiple enemies. But they seem to have a death wish in any boss or strong enemy encounters, frustratingly running right into harm's way. You can lock onto enemies by clicking the right stick, but the targeting frequently breaks when dealing with highly mobile enemies, and at times the lock-on makes the camera lose its freaking mind. Reviving party members is nothing new, but it takes a million years, and if the enemy lands an attack during that time, you'll have to start over. Boss battles bring out the worst in the combat system. You see, being able to blindside enemies grows the AP bar for lengthier combos. But bosses are often difficult, if not impossible, to blindside, meaning you'll only be able to land 1 or 2 heavy attacks before waiting for the AP bar to fill back up, which just makes these fights a slog. And unfortunately, this lasts from the first boss battle to the last one. Now, an epic sci-fi fantasy hybrid should capture the imagination with its visuals, and thankfully, Star Ocean: The Divine Force doesn't disappoint. There's a certain charm to the doll-esque characters designed by Akira Yasuda of Final Fight and Street Fighter fame. Whether an armored princess wielding dual blades, a buff steampunk mage, or an android with a huge database, the party members each have a wonderful and distinct look that adds to their character, with maybe the exception of Raymond's Tina Turner hair. The world too is a visual treat. I often found myself stopping on hilltops or floating islands to gawk at the lush, alien landscape surrounding me. The vistas are gorgeous with a staggering sense of scale, and as I traversed the massive maps, I couldn't help but stop and poke around almost every corner. While the game has fast travel, I rarely used it because of how often I enjoy navigating the spaces and taking in the sights. I've read a lot of criticisms about the visuals, and it made me wonder if we were playing the same game. Sure, it's not like this is some bleeding-edge tech rivaling the best AAA games for raw fidelity, but the blend of realism and anime with the pure artistry on display is a sight to behold. The overall package is certainly beautiful, and without a doubt a step up from prior entries, making this the best-looking Star Ocean game to date. The English voice acting is also great, without any obnoxiously grating caricatures to deal with this time. The strong voice cast is able to convey a wide emotional range, capturing the feeling of each scene. And even the post-game dungeon scenes now feature voice work, which is a series first. The epicness of the soundtrack can be summed up with a single name: Motoi Sakuraba. Such a prolific and storied composer as Sakuraba has numerous sounds and styles in his repertoire. So what are we getting here? Epic horn-laden choirs? Futuristic prog rock synths? Or maybe a serene and somber acoustic feel? Well, how about all of the above? Peaceful, ambient guitars welcome you to the small towns. Raymond's theme captures a weird, fun, and energetic vibe. And Leticia's theme has a Valkyrie style, complete with strings, horns, and heavy chants. For a fan of all things Sakuraba, Star Ocean: The Divine Force is a true showing of his creativity and prowess. Just take a listen. Okay, the game's fun to play, looks and sounds good, but how much game is there, really? Well, there's a lot, and for you completionists, you'll get your money's worth. If you're looking to do everything, expect the usual, like maxing out all of your stats, becoming an ISOA champion, and scouring the maps for secrets. On top of that, you'll need to see each of the 16 endings.
Oh, well...
Now don't panic, that doesn't mean 16 playthroughs, but you'll have to play through the game at least twice, one for each protagonist. Toward the end of each playthrough, you can ensure you've built the right relationship with each character to see their ending. All in, you're looking at anywhere from 70 to 90 hours to do everything, and I loved nearly all of that time. I only wish there was a better system for tracking some of the collectibles to make cleanup a bit easier. I put some of the tools I use to help me out in the description just below the like button of this video. After the disastrous critical and financial performance of the previous game, Star Ocean: Integrity and Faithlessness, it's a surprise that Star Ocean: The Divine Force exists at all. It seems as if ample development time, a sizable budget, and freedom to evolve the world and mechanics were all Tri-Ace needed. Go figure. I thoroughly enjoyed my 80 hours with Star Ocean: The Divine Force. The exploration and movement is stellar from beginning to end. Even with some of the frustrating boss battles, the combat system is fun, flashy, and exciting. The art design is often jaw-dropping and overcomes any budget limitations. With a cast of characters you'll want to get to know and the replayability that will drive you to do just that. By all accounts, this is the best Star Ocean game in nearly 2 decades, and a welcome direction for the series. If you've ever been curious about the series like me, or have been steered away by the recent entries, Star Ocean: The Divine Force is worth getting lost in. Star Ocean: The Divine Force, I loved it. What about you? Now, if you liked the video, hit like and subscribe. And if you want another game that you haven't played, check out my video right here. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.